Good evening. I'm Chris Carr. Welcome to our symposium, Notions and Strategic Uses of Personhood and Soul-like Essences among Early Woodland, Middle Woodland, and Postcontact Indians of the Eastern Woodlands. The YouTube videos on this channel are the papers in a symposium that was to be presented at the annual meeting of the Society for American Archaeology in April 2020 in Austin, Texas. When the meeting was canceled, we created YouTube videos of our papers as an alternative venue. The papers in this symposium address three interrelated themes. First is the central place of ideas about soul-like essences within concepts of personhood in non-Western societies. Second is the inclusion of other than human beings in the cultural category of person and the soul-like essences that they are recognized to have. Third is the implications of these two facets of personhood for understanding a variety of cultural subjects, including intercommunity alliance formation, placemaking, and issues of territoriality. Here we venture into the strategic uses of ideas about souls and other than human persons. I'd like to take a few moments to place the papers in a broader conceptual and historical perspective. First to clarify is our terminology. By soul-like essences, or souls in shorthand, we do not refer to the narrow Christian-derived notion of an entity that is derived from God, burdened with original sin, unitary and ethereal in nature, responsible for vitality, has an existence after death, and such. The domain of soul-like essences considered here is instead cross-culturally encompassing, diverse, and based on Native peoples' own descriptions of their understandings of bodily, sensual, and psychological phenomena. The cross-cultural survey reported today by Rafidi, Kupch, and colleagues makes this encompassing perspective clear. Their survey shows that woodland and plains Indians of the historic period attributed a great diversity of characteristics to one or more essences or entities that were usually thought to reside in the interior of a human during life. Such diverse characterization of internal essences is true globally as well. Nonetheless, these many conceptions have cross-cultural patterns, sometimes strong, that derive from bodily, sensual, and psychological experiences that humans share and try to explain. The shared experiences include near-death experiences, deathbed visions, shamanic and non-shamanic trances, day visions, dreams, and other twilight states of consciousness. Thus, it is empirically reasonable to carve out a cross-cultural descriptive category, which we call soul-like essences for lack of a better term, and which does not presume the characteristics proposed specifically by Christianity or other worldviews. For example, soul-like essences are commonly said to be the source of one's consciousness, volition, vitality, movement, good health, personality, emotions, desires, and/or dreams. They are often located in the head, heart, bodily fluids, various organs, joints, and/or the breath. The distinction between a free soul that can leave the physical body and one or more body souls that remain with it during life is widespread in non-Western cultures. A second matter to emphasize is the important roles that concepts and experiences of soul-like essences have played and do play in the everyday life and ceremonies of Native North Americans and of most non-Western peoples. Soul-like essences were and are core to social, political, economic, technological, medical, philosophical, religious, and eschatological matters of non-Westerners. For example, the 17th century Wyandot Huron Indians mixed together in ossuaries the bones and bone souls, the Atiskan, of their deceased from multiple communities in order to forge spiritual political alliances among those souls and among their living relatives in those communities. The 19th century Oklahoma Cherokee, in times of crisis, blended together the tobaccos of their 7 clans, and clan leaders smoked the mix in order to blend together their souls and bodies and to ensure cooperation among all Cherokee. From the Canadian Arctic to the southeastern woodlands, Aboriginal hunters were required to follow stringent practices of respect to game animals when pursuing, killing, and processing them, lest the soul of the animal report misbehaviors to the master of the species or of all species, who would then withhold future game from the hunter or cause illness to the hunter or his community. The Northwest Coast Kwakiutl of the 19th century envisioned hunting as a spiritual covenant between humans and animals that allowed the continuation of the world. Hunting allowed animals to be killed so that their souls could be reborn, and provided sustenance to the hunter and his kin so that they could procreate and bring back into flesh the souls of their ancestors who had died and awaited rebirth. The Perry Island Ojibwa in the early 20th century experienced plants to have three parts: a body, a reincarnating soul-like essence, and a shadow ghost, just like humans. Leaves plucked from a plant for medicine required a reciprocal gift of tobacco to the plant, lest the plant's soul be unable to reincarnate and the medicine be impotent. Working with soul-like essences is the foundation of all classic shamanistic techniques, such as healing, hunt divination, finding lost objects, guiding the deceased to an afterlife, and maintaining ecological balance. Soul concepts and practices are essential to most non-Western peoples' worldviews and everyday doings. Third, one of the founding and enduring central goals of anthropology is to penetrate the motivations of non-Western peoples and to make sense of their decisions and actions, to understand them in their own terms. The examples I just cited illustrate that this goal is often unattainable without bringing into consideration people's ontologies, including their ideas about soul-like essences. Yet, in 1988, with the publication of her book The Gender of the Gift, the British ethnologist Marilyn Strathern set in motion a suite of theoretical movements in anthropology, and eventually in archaeology, that turned their backs on native non-Western peoples' experiences and ideas about their soul-like essences. The voices of non-Western peoples were ignored. Very significantly, also left behind were the motivating forces that native peoples' perceptions of and ideas about soul-like essences have in their decisions and actions. Strathern replaced native concepts of personhood that know the self and the social person to revolve around one's soul-like essences and other substances with a removed etic view that theorizes a person to be internalized social relations with others. These social elements of the so-called partible individual were analyzed by Strathern in a British social structuralist manner, with little reference to native reported systems of meaning, logic, and worldview. Strathern's study was soon followed by parallel works by British, European, and American anthropologists Andrew Strathern, Maurice Godelier, Roy Wagner, Marshall Sounds, Mike Mosco, and others. Together, their soulless views of natives, the self, and personhood spawned the equally soulless schools of thought about non-Western ontologies with which many archaeologists today are enamored: embodiment theory, relational ontology, and certain elements of the ontological turn movement. Embodiment theories hold that individuals are embodied social and cultural identities, relations, experiences, and substances, but give no place for souls. Relational ontology, as V.P. Herva summarizes, quote, proposes that neither organisms nor things have an unchanging internal essence, unquote. A second resonating line of intellectual thought that turned a deaf ear to non-Western people's concerns about their souls and how those concerns motivate social actions is rooted in the German, French, and English phenomenological philosophies of Husserl, Merleau-Ponty, and Whitehead. They logic that subjects and perceived objects are not fully distinct, that entities do not pre-exist before their perception, and consequently that beings and things are comprised of the relationships they have with other beings and things. Entities exist only in the context of a network of relations and processes, and have no intrinsic internal substance. Entities are fully soulless. The logic of these philosophies is perfectly natural. These views were developed in response to Descartes' dualistic philosophy, which had already filtered out Aristotle's notion of the soul as the essence of a being and early medieval Catholicism's conflation of the body and soul. From Husserl, Merleau-Ponty, and Whitehead, it is a short intellectual journey to the contemporary anthropological and archaeological movements of the new materialism of Bjornar Olsen, the relationalism of Christopher Watts, the entanglements of Ian Hodder, and the line and mesh theories of Timothy Ingold. All attempts at building general philosophies of ontology and social relations, all empty of soul concepts, and all mislaid onto non-Western peoples whose ideas about personal and social well-being are founded on notions about soul-like essences and whose motivations for action entail those soul-like concepts. Three other historical causes of soulless ontological research in contemporary archaeology and anthropology should be highlighted. First is the anthropologist of aesthetics, Robert Armstrong, whose notion of effective presence led Alfred Gell to develop his theory of object agency, which is central to the new materialism. Objects are said to have agency, but not the sentience and volition that non-Western peoples so commonly attribute to non-Western beings and some things. Second, some important threads of the ontological turn movement have been constructed by archaeologists in Britain and Europe. There, largely lacking rich ethnographic records of pre-state tribal societies like the documentation in the Americas, British and European archaeologists have turned to soulless Western philosophies to develop models of pre-modern ontologies and to try to fathom what the ontologies of local protohistoric and prehistoric peoples might have entailed. The fit of these philosophies to the peoples is not likely good, considering cross-cultural regularities in the importance of soul concepts to the worldviews and actions of pre-modern peoples. Finally, the soulless ontologies put forward by and applied by most contemporary archaeologists to interpret the lives of non-Western and pre-modern peoples derive sadly from the sheer lack of formal education of most archaeologists in the fields of religious studies and comparative religion, and in cross-cultural variation in worldviews. How can one reasonably investigate soul-like concepts and their social, political, economic, and material effects in past non-Western societies if one doesn't have a good grasp of cross-cultural variation in worldviews and religions? Not all recent archaeological and ethnological approaches within the ontological turn movement of studying native ontologies have ignored soul-like essences. Especially significant are the new animism of Graham Harvey and the perspectivism of Averos de Castro, which consider the relationships of humans to animals and other material entities as social persons, but also give a central place and active roles to their inner essences. Harvey explicitly derived his paradigm from A. Irving Hollowell and Kenneth Morrison, both of whom focused attention on the inner essences of persons. Other key authors of these paradigms include Howard Herod, Ian McNiven, Rain Willersev, Robert Losey, and Philippe Descola. This symposium attempts to begin to correct the course taken by many anthropologists, archaeologists, and schools of thought who, since the 1980s through the present, have given no part to soul-like essences in the lives and doings of non-Western peoples. The papers presented today acknowledge and pursue native understandings of soul-like essences, how those ideas motivate people's actions, and the social and broader consequences. Many of the presentations this evening are resumes of chapters in a forthcoming book. The book is entitled Being Scioto Hopewell, Ritual Drama and Personhood in Cross-Cultural Perspective, authored by most of tonight's speakers and published by Springer Nature. You can get further information about this book at Springer's website, given here. The participants of the symposium and I wish to give a special thanks this evening to our teammate, Brianna Rafidi. She graciously took on the task of producing all the videos from our PowerPoint and audio files. Thank you, Brianna.